Oh, I actually wasn't even thinking Wildstar. I was thinking Elder Scrolls. But yeah, we can go through that list. Yeah. Right? Everybody can like call out a different failed WoW.
I'd want to recommend maybe a good MMO that has the story you might look for would be Guild Wars 2. In that,
I will say I was debating the quality of MMOs.
It's not about the quality aside. It's more like you're not necessarily the chosen one. It's more like you're a cog in the machine in a sort of way.
So the story itself is good.
Yeah. The story itself is more.
The world is well developed. The story is not that good.
No, but it does.
Argue back and forth about the quality of the narrative. I think that one of the things that we do see though is one of the non-WoW MMOs to survive. He delivers us some awesome stories because it takes a totally different perspective, right? Give the players the tools to establish a rich story for themselves. And so I think as we move forward, as we get past the paradigm of WoW, we're going to start again seeing exploration in the MMO space, and that will provide us with stories that we didn't expect, perhaps from sources like players that we hadn't traditionally considered.
Well, I feel the same way you do about WoW. What movie is Ashman's Call?
I do, yeah. All right.
We'll continue with the, don't want to drag out too much. With the time and money it takes to make an MMO, do you see that type of personalization? I mean, you have to convince investors and everything compared to the model that works to something brand new, and it's a lot of money and time to make an MMO. So can you see that happening anytime soon?
So there's a lot of different, right? First off, we have seen Kickstarter projects that could certainly pay for an MMO at this point, right? But more than that, it depends on what you think of as an MMO. When we think of your WoW style MMO, that's just this monumental investment. I totally grant that. But when we think of things like, that just tells you how tired I am. The guys who made Triple Count, what's the MMO they made? Top-down shooter MMO?
Where you get experience just by being in the
Relevant MAGfest?
Relevant MAGfest. Right, that MMO was made by a small team for next to nothing. Korea is really good at turning out 2D MMOs and cheap 3D MMOs.
Dungeon Fighter.
Right, but there's all the ones that have a massive multiplayer element that don't cost $100+ million. And I think $100+ million budget, you're absolutely right, is very restrictive. And I think that the next wave of MMOs we see in the United States aren't going to see that investor backing because investors have been burnt too often. And so it will force people to innovate in order to produce things that are interesting on customers.
So Minesweeper MMO now.
Absolutely. Sure. Because the one thing I want with Minesweeper is other people frantically clicking.
No, it's which.
I'm going to let you call on people.
Oh, good. My job.
Yes.
All right. I go to a school that's a little more like politically active. I don't go to game design. We have a program area, blah, blah, blah. So my question's not about game design. One of the things I get is I feel like I'm with all these smart people, but then I mention video games or something along those lines, and they'll go, let me tell you what the problem is with your thing. And we do have problems there. I have found friends who are like, your treatment of women is terrible. I have people who are like, your online communities are terrible, and you have people like telling me to go die. And I try to explain, I'm like, well, it's not all like that. And they just tell me like, you're ignoring the problems instead of dealing with them. How do I, and then they're not willing to then come in and be like, no, come play To the Moon with me or something like that, and I'll show you that games can be just as amazing. So how do I talk to someone who's not willing to delve into the material that I have? And then also, how do I debate them without just being like, trying to like push the bad stuff under the rug? I acknowledge it, but at the end of the day, I just feel like I'm dancing around it.
So there are two sides. There are a couple of different ways, depending on how direct the confrontation, not adversarial, but confrontation goes. I was recently talking to a minister of a very large series of churches through Games for Good about some of these things, and he was like, well, you have all these howling, terrible people who have no respect in your who play video games. And I had to respond. Imagine if I called all Christians Westboro Baptist Church, right? And so I just took the example of something from the thing that they care about, because everything has their small, marginal, howling community, right? And we just compare the two and say, hey, see past that and give it a chance. And then the other thing is also to say, look, yes, it has problems, but this is something that reaches hundreds of millions of people. This is the fastest growing medium in the history of humanity. We spend, as a species, more hours every year playing Microsoft Solitaire than it took us to build all the great wonders of the world. So, let's try and make it together better together. Listen, work with me, come at this meeting. Yeah.
I just think we have a really bad habit of trying to air our dirty laundry for the world to see. I don't know, I think, is there a time where we're giving them past that, like, despite the fact that it sort of generates a lot of news, unfortunately.
What do you mean? Define.
I don't know, it seems like through a lot of, how do I try to put this, and I'm not trying, this nothing to do with hashtag we will not discuss again.
I think that as a community, I think we are big enough and strong enough to admit that there are things that we need to be okay with it, and even people who accuse us of things say, yes, there are things wrong, but this has great power, and work with us, help us make it better.
Yeah, I think it's just more the way to, is there a way to try to point them in the direction of, better discussions aside from the whatever immediate hit pieces like you find like through the Gawker network or so.
So I hate to actually use us, but like I would hope that some there's lots of other people like out there who are writing really valuable things. Just go find one place where some kid in a comment about a game or about a video about a game or whatever talks about the fact that it saved his life, right? Because I've talked to kids all the time. I mean, when I was in high school, right, I had my headphones on all the time. I really think, I remember, it's gonna sound silly, but Seattle in the 90s, I remember somebody handing me a tape of Soundgarden and some Nirvana Unplugged and some of this stuff. And I remember hearing Jesus Don't Want Me for Sunday. And I really think that saved my life, right? Without music, I wouldn't have gotten through that particular period. And I mean, games have been that for a lot of us. And anything that can be that powerful should hopefully resonate, right? So, hey, look, here's somebody who says, this thing is my world, this thing saved my life. Let's use that for as much good as we can.
I think you can also say that, like, this is the thing I'm passionate about, and because of that, I dislike all the negative stuff about the community just as much as you do, or anyone from outside the gaming community who would bring up those sorts of things.
And something else that's been bothering me a lot is that other art forms, other art media, they're almost given carte blanche to do whatever they want. It's like you say anything bad about almost any other form of art, whether it's just pictures, that digital art on the internet, and most of the stuff on DeviantArt, or certain branches of the film industry. They're pretty much saying, if you say that there's any sort of inherent problem in those media, they'll look at you and say, well, you just don't get it.
Well, yeah, but movies also went through kind of the phase that we went through, we're going through right now, where they had like their kind of time where, oh man, all these movies are like promoting like unethical things and stuff like that, and soon they pushed themselves through that.
My favorite is to go all the way back, right? Shakespeare was, reviled low art that was corrupting society. Right? So, opera was the work of there's so much about corruption. We go through this time and time again. I do think we are starting to get to the point where we should be getting out of this, and one of the issues is that we are slower than almost any other modern industry, the modern film industry, the modern music industry, the modern television industry, any modern art industry, to actually have a lobbying group in Washington. We have ESA, but they don't really function as a lobbying group. They function as a very small lobbying group that does almost very few things for a very select group of publishers and developers within the industry. We haven't all come together to pool money to really fight, to make us living way for everyone. And so we get that a lot more than some other industries as well.
I'm sorry. It sounded like you were talking about how you engage with people who have these like vehemently anti whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I've faced that. I think everybody here probably has that. Those people who say, "Oh, gamers are bad."
They're so smart
But
sometimes.
I know what you're saying. You want to teach them and say it's not like that. Look at this interesting thing. Look at perhaps when we play Braid or
If they're really dismissive, just be like, you're being dismissive.
But don't even say that. Just don't engage with them. If they're not going to hear you out, then it's not even worth really fighting about. It's just not. It only makes you almost support. They're going to dig their heels in and say, "No, I was right. This guy's an asshole. What he's doing to me."
Worst case scenario, and you're just like, you say something that just fuels that fire.
Right, but they're just going to dig their heels in and say, "Look at this. I was right the whole time. He's trying to force his demon work on me."
Well, that's not necessarily true.
Yeah.
There are ways to approach the topic which can avoid the adversarial standpoint. Like James was saying, and I'd like to talk to you directly because this is a problem I face as well. I'm a PhD student. I want to study games and education, so I want to be an advocate for games in a positive sense. But I face all the time people saying, like, best case scenario, what is the value that games have to present to us? Worst case scenario, have you seen Gamergate?
Hashtag shall not be mentioned.
First off, let me tell you, you're not alone, so don't feel like you have to go through this alone. There's a community out here who can help you handle this. And secondly, I think the key point is finding what the person you're trying to talk to values and what they can relate to, like James was talking about. So, what's your major?
Latin American and Hemisphere stuff.
Latin American Hemisphere. I'm sorry, I have no idea.
Just think Mexico and then everyone else who actually exists too.
What I can tell you, for example, my discipline's engineering, and in engineering we have computer science. And one thing I always point out is, in computer science in 1984, the field of computer science drove away women from the field much the same way the Gamergate is trying to push women away from games right now. And that's something they can relate to, and I can just say, you don't look back at that and say computer scientists are all trash, the field of computer science should just go away. You look back at it and say, what can we learn from that experience and how can we move forward from it? And that's exactly what computer science is trying to do now. And by finding that little piece that they can relate to, it really helps change the conversation.
I think another big part of it too is, given what your major is, I think you're probably familiar with some of these concepts, is our definition of the words we use. Like, we use these words like airing our grievances. Sorry, not to call you out, or us and them. We can't look at it like we're airing our grievances. We have to look at it like we're acknowledging some faults within a community. We're not defending ourselves from belligerent attackers. We're having a conversation about problems within a subset of media as a whole. The issues that video games face, they are not isolated to video games. Let's just talk about Academy Awards right now. How many directors that win Best Director are women? There's so many issues with media in general, and we need to acknowledge that this isn't a video game thing, this isn't a thing, this is a societal thing. And the sooner we can acknowledge that and, again, redefine the words we're using and put how we see stuff in a different perspective, the better, the easier it'll be for us to have a conversation about it.
I'll tell you, I can't fix the societal problems, right? But I can tell you, like, if your friends are the ones that are telling you, like, hey, I don't think video games are a worthwhile medium, you tricked them into playing a video game, And I'll tell you, I did this last week. This is the Bill method of how to trick people to play video games. There's two strategies. There's two games that I always use. Johann Sebastian Joust, right? And Button. I don't know if you guys have heard it. It's like Brutal Tactics OK Now, right? Have you guys heard about this game?
I've heard of it.
Both of them are super simple. Both of them require no video game experience whatsoever. Insofar you have to say it's a video game with Johann Sebastian Joust. And that's exactly what I did last week. 4 people came to my house who are super nerds, but are super liberal with all the liberal institution like I did, right? And they don't like video games. In fact, I took out the Move controllers, and one of my friends was like, I don't even want to touch that thing. Like, I don't want to get hooked on video games. Like, I hear all these happy things about video games.
Is that your friend? Is that
But hold on.
I just pictured a wide-ass
But then he sees us playing the game. Right? And he's out, he's standing out the outside being
I'm not
like,
gonna touch video.
at first he's just like, I don't want, no. But then we're playing Johann Sebastian Joust, a fun game which is immediately accessible. It doesn't require to know how your menus work or UIs work or hand-eye coordination. You're just playing with friends. And that joy that you see in the playing video games, I swear to God, as soon as you finish playing, you're like, I gotta play again. We played for hours, right? And that's the opener. Right? Because the problem that we're encountering with your friends is that the reason why they don't say movies are evil is because they watch movies, right? They know the medium. It's not a scary thing because they interact with it on a regular basis, right? So the minute you demystify video games, the minute you put a video game in their hand and they enjoy the experience, I was like talking about video games. So I was like, yeah, there's this other video game called Papers, Please. It's gonna blow your mind.
And that would especially be good for you as well.
I think this is also, I think this is actually a really important point because it gets to a larger thing, right? We exist in a society where we have ceased to believe that people's minds can change, and we separate everything into this binary division. We are either Democrat or Republican, right? We are either right or left, and we either love video games or we hate them. And I know I've heard a lot of, well, I don't want to talk to people. No, we have to engage in that dialogue because we can, right? Minds can change, people can change. We will learn things ourselves by engaging in that dialogue. So we can't just assume that there is that us and them mentality. But I saw a bunch of hands up. I thought I saw a hand back there. Do you have a comment?
I had a comment about just
throw it.
If I don't know if your friends have a problem with video games or video game culture, if they're like, I don't want to be part of like, I'll play Candy Crush, but I'm not like you. You could let them know that like a feminist critique of a game isn't an outsider looking in. It's we're gamers and we say, hey, we're already in this space, but we want to talk about it in this way, and we want these things to happen for us. So there's not a line between feminists and gamers. They can be, if they play the game and they like it, they're too bad, they're gamer. You can't go back. Like
We try to define our community by exclusion, and that's a problem. But we're starting to get some people who were part of the other mages panel. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Chris Hazard. I run Hazard Software. We do mostly strategy level serious games. So that's games for a purpose other than entertainment for corporations, organizations, governments, things like that. We're mostly known for our 2011 game Akron, the time travel RTS, for anyone who's played that. We're hoping to have another game out this year, which is a time travel Bomberman type thing, turn-based. So yeah, I've got a PhD in AI. That's me. Artificial intelligence. Computer science.
All right, so
When this year? Well, we're still debating, so I'm not going to announce that.
time traveling Bomberman. What was that?
We were talking, you sort of brought up the idea of lobbies. It isn't that hard. How many people here remember BAT? Bothered about Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh yeah.
Early 80s, mother-led group that said Dungeons and Dragons were going to kill you. Somebody at the same time? Yes. But it's not known.
They should have been watching out for World of Darkness. That's where the real danger
At this time, TSR, which was the largest gaming RPG company in the world, ran away from these people like crazy. The 1983 Dungeons and Dragons animated series deliberately dropped clerics because they didn't want to bring up the issue. But all it took was one writer one freelance writer, Mike Stackpole, that had some backup from a couple different companies that were very minor at the time, Flying Buffalo, and he took these people on. And it took 3 or 4 years, but he broke them. Well, and I'm saying that it doesn't require, massive lobbying in order to break these groups. It just requires somebody to stand up and say, and fight back respectfully and politely. But literally, Mike Stackpole spent 2 years in the mid-'80s actually going around to police departments in the country saying, no, if somebody is playing DD, it doesn't mean they're a murder suspect, right? So there are the social problems that you talk about, just talking about your friends, but also on the lobbyist problem, it just requires people to not run away from the conflict.
I'm a history and political science major, and I do American political history. The environment of lobbying in the 1980s and the environment of lobbying today is so wildly different. We're in an environment right now where lobbying organizations have a lot of money. In the 1980s, there was money. It wasn't like it is today.
And I absolutely agree with you, but...
No, I'm not saying it's wrong.
No, you're actually totally right, but there's also 100 million of us.
Yeah.
And I know that I've talked to Congress people and senators, and if they get 100 million letters or even 10,000 letters on a day from their own constituents, it still does matter. So maybe we can't fight it as individuals, and you're absolutely right. Lobbying firms have huge amounts of money, but on things that functionally don't matter to senators, we can make them matter if there's nobody fighting on the other side by actually just reaching out. Right?
Yeah, totally. What I meant was,
as far as I know, there are no groups that are going around and telling people gaming is evil. There's no people that are being lobbyists on the other side.
Oh,
right now.
That guy, the Miami lawyer.
Hashtag will never be. Hashtag person should not be named.
There was a guy, what you said about like the 100 million of us, I'm actually an MBA student right now. And for one of our classes, we actually had a bunch of guest speakers who worked in Congress and around Congress. And one of them was a lobbyist and for the National Pork Council. The good pork, bacon. And we asked him, we've never heard of you guys before. We've heard of Chamber of Commerce, we've heard of, and he goes, well, basically, it's pork farmers and pig farmers, and it doesn't sound like, and their budget is not, it's like less than $1 million, but they can mobilize with news, and they can just flood Congress with letters and phone calls from all the farmers, because they will get united really fast. So anytime like the farm bill comes up or any type of thing comes up, they can mobilize their base quickly to make sure that the congressman knows, and it puts a lot of pressure on them, and they back down very quickly when they see this massive.
Didn't something like that kind of happen when SOPA was still a thing?
I saw your video of the SOPA.
Yes, the SOPA FEMA stuff, was fought by citizens against giant corporations, so it is possible. But I just want to interrupt this real quick. Are there other Mages people here? I know that everybody who's part of Mages, do you just want to just stand up, introduce yourselves? And do you want to tell what Mages is?
All right, so I'm the coordinator of Majors. Jeremy Pesner here is my assistant in many ways. For those who don't know, Paul is the president of MAGfest.
Hi, Paul.
This is Castry and other our mages. So, Shell, you want to introduce yourself before?
Hi everybody, I'm Chanel Summers, and I was one of the panelists and speakers at Mages. I've been in the game industry for about 20 years, dating myself, and I focus primarily in the area of interactive audio for digital media. Been at a number of innovating game companies, including Microsoft, where I worked on Direct Music, the original Xbox team, and then was also recording and drummer, my own, I got my own audio production, prestigious universities as well. So great to meet everybody. I have to say, this is my first MAGfest, and it was incredible.
MAGfest.
It was amazing.
Sam, you want to introduce yourself? Sam, you want to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. My name is Sam Castry. Despite all appearances, I am a lawyer. They stand out in crowds. You know, thousands of people running around. Anyway, my practice, I have a lot of small indie game developers as clients, and I focus primarily on entertainment and intellectual property laws. Yeah, I'm available.
All right, now I believe you're a lawyer. Should we spread out the mages instead of one conversation?
I would like
So
to.
we'll get through this first.
I've been really liking the amount of back and forth. Like I like having everybody be able to share and communicate. And so if anybody wants to grab any of us individually, you probably just run up and say, come here for a sec.